Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. If this is your first time joining us, each week when you tune in, you're going to hear one of two different types of shows. Sometimes when you tune in, you're going to hear industry news. That's where we pull up a few different headlines and we talk about what it means for the land development industry. Other times when you tune in, you're going to hear an interview style show, and that's where we have on someone associated with the land development industry, and then we dig into some topics that are of interest to them. Now, today I'm excited to have with me Jose Lemus. Jose is the president and owner at LandDesign Consulting, as well as a civil engineering PhD candidate at Stanford University. Jose, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope I didn't just butcher your last name. We had already talked about it and everything, and I kind of extended the moose section of it, and so hopefully I didn't like totally butcher it there.
You said it perfectly. Thank
All
you so much. You
right.
must practice that.
All right. Well, wonderful. Well, hey, let's get into your background a little bit. So I know you have an engineering background, but you're also in land development now, and so I think what I would like to learn more about, and our listeners would like to hear about, is how you originally got into engineering, and then maybe walk us from that point up to how you ended up getting into land development, and then after that, we'll then move into some other things because I want to talk more about the Stanford program as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to talk about what my experience has been. So, I grew up in Lindsay, California. That's a small rural town in Central California. But I was very fortunate that I got to explore the whole Northwest uh, peninsula, I would say. I initially, after graduating high school, I went to Fresno State University. And while I was attending the university and majoring in civil engineering, I was fortunate to get an internship and begin working full time, even 2 years before I graduated. So that is definitely something I recommend to aspiring engineers. They really should get their experience rather than finish quickly. I would say it's better to finish in 5 years than to finish in four without any experience. And I was also able to obtain my EIT, or engineering training certificate, before I graduated college. So right off the chute, as soon as I graduated, I was already a project engineer working on some major stuff around the Central Valley in general, but around the state of California. So one of the particular things about that was that I got to learn how to do entitlements all the way up through construction. So I got the experience working with a small engineering firm, Gianetta Engineering, for 11 years. I worked there all the way up to 2014. So the cool part was that we were small, but we got to do some large scale developments, and that was interesting because usually it doesn't happen that way. But I believe the cool part about working with a small shop is that you're gonna get to see an array of different projects, and you'll get to do every part of it. Whereas working with a large design firm, I would say you'll be more siloed, and you probably will be a part of the development or part of the construction or the construction management, but you won't get to see the entire thing. So that's just my take. Um, and again, I got to see some large scale things happen early in my career. Eventually, in 2014, I decided to go back to school and get an MBA, which I would also recommend for any engineer. I would say that those soft skills are just very valuable in your career. So if you want to get into management or just project, not necessarily of people, but even project management, lots of the skills that I learned there were just incredible. So that was 2014, and I actually stopped working for that company and went into the public sector. So I decided to become a city engineer for City of Hanford California, and that was exciting to me. I was managing quite a bit of personnel in the civil engineering department, and I got to see the other side of the coin, where I got to understand the the whole jurisdictional side to things, where I was now representative of the city. So it really, it really gave me a perspective of, you have to take care of all sides when you're doing a development. Um, Eventually, or very quickly after, less than a year after, the public or the private side pulled me back in. So I went to work with a big national firm, and we started a branch office in Fresno, California, and I was flying around the whole western side of the United States and engineering projects in a multitude of states, and managing many people, as I would say as many as 50 or 60. And really, I think what I learned was that I'm not much of a corporate guy. I didn't particularly like that structure. So, because the projects were smaller, as surprising as that may sound, I ended up, uh, getting some nice contracts, but they were fairly small compared to what I was able to do in a more established company like the first one I worked in. Um, so, by 2017 is when I finally got to the point where I said, why am I working for someone? Why not just work for myself? And by doing that, I can set my own pricing. I don't have to sit there asking for a $300 an hour, um, project manager. And I ended up getting a lot of work through a lot of my contacts. Very early on, I started hiring lots of my friends. I got to the point where I really would just call some of my civil engineer friends, and I would say, "Hey, you need to put your 2 week notice. I just created another position. I need you now." And they would laugh, and actually, lots of them followed and wanted to be a part of creating this company, LandDesign Consulting. So 2017. Uh, Sometime in July is when we got started, and less than 6 months later, we were already 7, 8 engineers. By 2021, we got to 16 engineers, land surveyors. We had 2 crews. They were running around with top-notch equipment, with some of the nicest trucks I'd ever seen, and it was just incredible to see this entire thing created. The initial investment was incredible. I remember the first year, or by 2019, seeing numbers like $800,000 went into the business. And I don't even know where that came from, because I surely didn't have that kind of money. But um, as we were going and we were getting all these different contracts, we were just investing right back into the business. So Land Design Consulting came in at a really good time. 2017, 2018 was some really good ticks in the market, where all builders were just going as fast as they could. 2019 definitely was a good year. Even 2020, when we hit the whole COVID thing, that was, we were considered a vital part of you know of all operations. So we were allowed to go in the office here in California, and we were just jamming. We were doing lots of work in all sectors. I mainly focused on the actual home builders, because that's one of my passions, most definitely. So we ended up with about 5 of the top 10 nationals: Century Communities, KB Home, K. Hovnanian, D.R. Horton, Woodside Homes, and lots of the local guys as well. here in the Central Valley. And our as our clients as our clientele grew, we also grew the organization, and got to the point where we were doing massive amounts of work, massive of projects. So it was a great experience, to say the least. And then I finally got to where I found my niche. So one of the coolest parts about that was that I had a project for KB Home, and right next to them, we had to go through an easement we had already acquired. And I wrote a letter to the neighbor, and I said, "Hey, I remember entitling your project some 10 years ago with a different firm. We're going to have to go through this easement and collect some topography. And by the way, what are you going to be doing with your land? Are you interested in selling?" At the time, I was just interested in getting another job, Ryan. But uh, I ended up finally getting in contact with them, and I believe the son was a realtor. So when he got back to me, he said, we're our contract for selling this thing is ending with another realtor. So yeah, we're interested if you think you can spin it to one of your developers. I said, sure, I'll give it a try. And he said he wanted some big number, like 148,000 per acre. And I said, sure. Like, I really didn't understand numbers at that time. This was 2018. And I got to talking to K Hognanian because they want it back into the valley. And I got to the point where I said, hey, I got this thing ready. Are you interested? And they said, well, how much? I said, well, I had 109 lots, I remember. And I was thinking, what if we do like the neighbor? They sold at 33,000, but I engineered it. So I want 35, but the market is a little better. So I want 38 per lot. And they didn't even flinch. They said, sure, that works for us. We'll run through the feasibility. If it works, uh, sure, we'll do it. So I ended up doing, and here's the trade secret I wanted to share with everybody. We ended up doing a double escrow. So a double escrow, as you may know, is where you're taking the money from your buyer to pay your seller. And so really there's two escrows. There's a buy, which is between you and your seller, and there's a sell where it's an escrow account between you and your buyer. So really you end up with the net amount. So you end up owning the land for some 20 minutes while both deeds record. And sure enough, I ended up with this huge amount. I still considered myself young. I was probably about 35 at the time. And so I hit my first big number, and that really changed everything, Ryan. I think at that point, I was so excited. Of course, I almost lost my hair because it was very stressful towards the end to see this big number that could be, but I didn't have it. But I needed to get through feasibility, so I had to help the developer understand every number. Not just the development impact fees, but the construction cost of the land development. And because I was able to engineer this thing, because I positioned myself well, right? I have my own engineering company, and now I can do my own engineering plans. And we bid them out, and so there's no argument. That's something I would tell any land flipper out there. That's a very good position to be in, where you can engineer. Of course, that's a big cost. However, if you do that, there's no arguing. You just bid the plants out, and it is what it is. Those are the numbers, and you back into the actual land cost, and that's what you end up getting. So I lucked out, I would say, with my first deal, but it taught me a lot. And till date, I've done 16 deals. So I'm very fortunate that I found this niche. So as I've been engineering for all these companies, I also engineer for myself now, and I've positioned myself to the point of you know I have all the contacts with land acquisition, so I'm able to send everybody, here you go, are you interested? You have till Friday to get me an LOI. And then once I get my LOIs, in a particular parcel, I end up with a few usually, and then I decide this is who I'm gonna try to negotiate with, and so far so good. So it's been a great deal for our little company to be able to do that. The engineering piece, it's more for passion. It does well and it pays the bills, and I do okay. However, the land deal side is where you can really create some wealth, I would say. So that's been really fun.
Yeah. Well, I love the story. I love the story of your first land deal that you did because that's I think that's cool. I think people like hearing that as well. And I want to go back to something you said earlier where you said a lot of the people or several of the people that you used to work with came to work with you when you started your company. And I think, at least from my perspective, that says a lot about you and your character and who you are, that you have people that you've worked with willing to leave their careers and come and work with you. It's it's not necessarily the work that they're going to be doing, it's who they're going to be doing that work with. And so I think that's really cool that you had some people you used to work with who came along for the ride.
Yeah, right. And I think it's so important you said that. I believe that, when you begin your career, it's the beginning of everything you're going to be doing. So not knowingly, I was creating all these relationships since I began, as an intern. And I would deal with clients. So I was good at creating all these relationships. So eventually, when I decided to do my own thing, it was very natural. And I can't take credit on my own. I most definitely uh, got lots of help to create this company. But yeah, it's all about relationships, and I definitely sharpened up through my MBA experience. Again, I would really recommend that to a lot of people. And then, of course, I kind of seem to do this to myself every 10 years. So I graduated with my Bachelor of Science in Civil in 2005, and I graduated with my MBA in 2015. Now, 10 years later, I'm back at school. So I'm
Yeah.
now going after doing my PhD at Stanford University. I really lucked out. I believe you know there's some good professors there, um, like Dr. Martin Fisher, who's just an expert at BDC. Dr. Rishi Jain, just his urban informatics is unreal. All the work he's doing, and Dr. Khalid Osman, who's just phenomenal with getting into water and just people, the people side to things. He's really big on that. He's taught me something in a class I'm taking currently about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Why people have this need to do things and self-actualization and all these different things. Um, but there's even a higher need where people feel the need to help others. So I think that is most definitely a driver for me at this point to say, well, I've done well in my career and I've gotten to do, so many cool things with engineering, and especially all these land deals where I really want to give back. So that was part of the reason I decided to go back to school and into academia and potentially change our industry, with doing not just research, but getting to the point where I can do some of the policy and teach. I put together a class last semester in sustainable land development and housing creation in general, because I believe that we are in a housing crisis, but it's more than that. It's actually a land crisis. The houses you can create at any point, but land you can't create. So we have systematic issues at every level of the creation of housing. And so I do believe that we need to solve it, and some of us who can do have a responsibility to go back and help. So I most definitely am driven by that, Ryan, at this point in my career. But it's been such a cool ride, and I've been at Stanford since last summer, and it really humbled me, to be around a lot of these extremely smart young people, and my professors that are just brilliant. So it's been a humbling experience, and I've done well. I've done very well. Again, Dr. Rishi Jain, who is my advisor for the PhD, he saw something, and he's believed in me. So he's bringing me on to get heavy into real estate development. Um, but yeah, the funding mechanisms they use there are very interesting, and I got a heck of a package for that, and just extremely thankful. But I believe this
Yeah.
is the path for me as far as helping or giving back.
This episode of the Land Development Podcast is brought to you by Groove. Groove isn't just a map, it's a complete platform for developers and land professionals to prospect parcels, organize research, and manage deals all in one place. You can start your free 14-day trial with no payment information required by going to letsgroove.com/signup. That's letsgroov.com/signup. All right, let's get back to the show. Well, I think it's definitely something that I want to stay in touch with you on, because I want to see how the program goes, over time, and what that looks like, especially long term for you, as you get into maybe teaching and some of those other things, and what that could look like while you do that, maybe in parallel to continuing to run your own companies, right? Where you're
Most
doing,
definitely.
yeah, yeah. So that'll be interesting to follow along. I want to switch gears here just a little bit into um, something related to, well, you're out in California, obviously,
Right.
and I think up to this point I've only interviewed one other person out in California. We've been pretty heavy in other parts of the country, and so I feel like, and maybe this is just me here in the Midwest that I get this perception, but I feel like California gets a pretty bad rap from the rest of the country, at
Sure.
least from the Midwest, and largely, it's said that California is very difficult to do business there. It's very difficult to develop land. There's a lot of red tape, and it can be challenging. I'm just curious, from your perspective, what is that process like out there? Do you see things easing at all? Especially even with the wildfires that happened, and then all of a sudden there's really a need for more housing, and they need to come back in and build up some of the houses and everything. Is there an easing, or what's it like?
In my experiences, I've been engineering on the western side of the United States, in multiple states like Colorado and Arizona, and mostly California. And so I can tell you that if you can do, you know, engineering or just development in general in California, you can do it anywhere. It is difficult here, and it doesn't have to be. It's just there's a multitude of issues at every level, and that goes from bottom up, from just planning all the way through construction. The requirements, obviously we have CEQA, or California Environmental Quality Act, and it's very stringent, and it should be. I mean, we're all, any engineer would probably consider themselves some kind of environmentalist. However, when they say that word here, it's a bad word. It's actually someone who oftentimes, wants to halt the development instead of mitigate the actual effects of the development. So in reality, it's used as a deterrent. So when it should be a very contiguous deal with development, you really should take care of your environment, because if you're really going to get to sustainability, it's not just about taking care of of penciling a deal. It should be about taking care of your environment. It should be about taking care of people. in general. Like that's in turn why I'm going back and researching how to uh, how to develop these impact fees and on a value system. But I mean, back to your question, I do believe that it is difficult here, and it doesn't have to be. I it depends where you're at in California. If you go to the Bay Area and Southern California, it is much more difficult than Central Valley. Central Valley doesn't have as many requirements. Where yeah, those other two areas are just incredibly difficult, and it doesn't serve people. Obviously, the whole wildfire deal and how the governor decided to allow bypassing the environmental, you know, on that, so that we can get to building or rebuilding those communities quickly, is definitely a good deal. But we're gonna probably see something towards the end of it, where it won't be as favorable to people. Why? Because there's going to be contaminants. There's going to be lots of things that are just going to be overlooked, and unfortunately, with the environment, you can't overlook things. But we have to. So at least he understood that, and we're able to go forward now instead of having to do lots of studies and lots of other things. But here it is difficult. I currently have one in Bakersfield, so that's still Central Valley, where about I would say it's a 20-acre site, and one of the environmental groups decided to send a letter right before a planning commission just to say, hey, you forgot a report for a burrowing owl, and it's October and they nest in September. So guess what? You have to wait an entire year.
Mm.
And that's where, gosh, it's just it does now. 80, 90 families are going to wait for their home for an extra year, where we just simply can't build them fast enough here.
Yep.
We don't have the hottest markets in the nation right now because we can't build them fast enough. So it is true. It is true. It is very true. I would say I would agree with people in the Northwest. Uh, I'm sorry,
In the Midwest.
in the yeah Midwest. I would say it's a lot easier process out there.
Yeah, and you still, I mean, yeah, as I talk to people, you still, I feel like everywhere has their things. I mean that, there's red tape everywhere basically,
Right.
and trying to come to some sort of consensus or some sort of middle ground of how much is enough, right? So, having a conversation with someone who wants all red tape gone, right? So it's like I just want to go build what I want to build, which in theory in a perfect world where everybody does right, like that would work. But
Right.
unfortunately, there are some bad actors out there who will take advantage of some of that stuff, and then that's what ends up bringing the regulations in. So there has to be some sort of balance on it, because I don't think we live in a world where everybody's going to do everything the right way, if they didn't have certain regulations. But at the same time, I do think there's processes that could be made more efficient. Even in your case, if it was known that the burrowing owl, nests in September, and they waited to reach out to you, even though they probably could have told you in August or
Right.
earlier. Like that's the type of thing where if they would have been on top of things and told you at the right time, they could have been relocated, per whatever the standards are to
Right.
relocate them, and then you could have continued on with your project. That's the type of stuff I feel like gives the red tape a bad name.
I completely agree with you, Ryan. I think that is definitely where we're missing it right now, and it should be more of like everybody should work together, not against each other. Because we all care, and again, uh, there's no right or wrong side. I believe that people when they're asking for something, it means they care. So it's just people need to be heard. But yeah, at this point, uh, I'm happy where things have gone, and I get to help more. But yeah, we're going to continue working here in California, and So yeah, I'd welcome anyone to reach out. If they want to have a conversation about land development or entitlements or construction, anything someone's interested in learning about, or just simply talking about, I welcome a conversation.
Well, nice. And I know we're getting close to 30 minutes here, but I want to extend us just a little bit because I have the lightning round questions I want to go through. So we'll do
Yes.
them pretty rapid fire. So like if you can give quick answers to each of these, we can get through the lightning round and kind of wrap up the episode here. But so 5 questions here. First one goes back to your experience on the public side. So based on your public works experience, what were the biggest challenges you noticed from the municipality side?
Well, that's a great question. So most recently in 2023, I was the public works director slash city engineer to City of Los Banos, which is about 50,000 population. And you have a Caltrans freeway running right through the center with 50,000 vehicles per day. And it definitely creates a good opportunity, but I think one of the things I noticed in that city was that the the level of understanding that a municipal level engineer has to have is big. So the challenges are real. We had sewer issues, water issues. There was chromium 6 in the water. I mean, the uh, the sewer treatment plant hadn't been dredged in decades, so there was so many different issues with the entire system. And I think the biggest challenge was simply the understanding of how to get to those solutions. I had the ability to reach out to some of my consultants, which are huge engineering firms, but they were very expensive. So the challenge was the city budget, and then obviously, like, how much should we spend on something to get to that solution. But yeah, the challenges were real. It was quite a bit. I
Yeah.
was there for 6 months, so
Okay.
I learned a
Well, it's
lot.
interesting. Yeah. So, one other thing here. So, when people talk about sustainability, I feel like there's maybe a different definition or a different way to look at it depending on who you are. And so, from your perspective, when you think about the projects that you design and potentially develop or design for others to develop, when you think of sustainability, what does that mean to you from a design standpoint? What do you think about?
That is definitely a question that we're still trying to figure out, even in a large university like Stanford. The actual definition, you're right. Like, it depends on who you are. So I believe that sustainability needs to take care of people. I think it needs to take care of the environment, and most definitely it needs to pencil. It needs to work out financially for everybody. So I think that would be a sustainable model where we can all get to something good for everybody.
Yeah, and I'm guessing the next one I have here, number three, is how do you manage the needs of the municipality and community with the needs and goals of the developer? And I think you have a unique perspective on this, obviously, because you've kind of been in all these different seats.
Yeah. So it's funny how, and I think I've said this in some of my classes. I believe when you're a young engineer and you're just starting off, you're gonna do as your boss says. You are representing your builder, and you're most definitely looking out for just their best interest. But as you progress in your career as an engineer, your power goes up, so you get to the point where you do get to influence how things go. So now these days, what I push is for healthier communities, where I'm listening a little more. I would say I'm listening to the city council members. I remember recently, on a subdivision I sold to Bonadelli Homes last year. The We got to the plant, or to the city council, and the mayor was asking me for more park space because we didn't have park space on a 20-acre site. We were right across the street from a park. So I said, well, why don't you just let us modify your park at our cost, instead of asking me to get rid of another lot or two just to give you more. And we got to an agreement right then and there, and we got our approval. But it taught me a lot. People want all these different things, all these amenities, simply because that's a value based type of thing. So my perspective isn't just, oh, I'm going to take care of my developer. My perspective now is, this is a long term thing. So we need to take care of our jurisdictions, of our cities, our people.
Yeah, I like that example. That's a good example. Let's see, two more here. So, what's the biggest thing overlooked by developers when they bring their plans or ideas to an engineering firm?
I think that's an interesting one, Ryan. I think that most developers need to understand that they need to align with the values of their engineer, or vice versa. Why do I say that? Because an engineer and a developer is almost like a marriage. You and especially here in California or the Central Valley, uh, developers are always stick around with the same engineers. So I do believe that a developer should understand what an engineer is about. What do they push? What are their ideas and their values ultimately?
All right, last one here. What's one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self when starting out in this industry?
Oh wow, I would say go and check out a multitude of places. You really should diversify, and don't spend too long on one place unless you know you're going to be there for good. But 5-6 years is a good number. And then you really should move on and learn from other places if that's your goal, to learn. I would say I spent 11 years in a place that I should have spent maybe 6 or 7. I learned a lot, but ultimately, it did get to the point where I had already done the biggest projects possible, and I wasn't going to grow anymore. So, change is a good thing, and that's kind of uh, counter to what a engineer is. We don't like change, but you should embrace it if you really want to grow. That's what I would say to my younger self.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you hopping on and having this conversation. It was really interesting. A lot of cool topics that you dug into, and your story is really interesting as well. How you got into the land side and everything. And what's the best way for people to connect with you, find out more about your company?
Oh, absolutely. I would say my email, my first name, last name at LandDesignConsulting.com. I would say that's the best way. Also, my cell phone, you're very welcome to share my cell phone. I'm all about talking and conversation. So anyone that reaches out, and I've done that to others that you've had on the show, by the way. And as I told you before, Ryan, and so I do connect with people that way. So I think conversation is definitely a way of sharing ideas and perspectives.
Yeah, so those of you listening in right now, don't shy away from looking down in the description of this episode and clicking through to the show notes page. I'll have the contact information there for Jose, so you'll be able to get that information there and give him a call, shoot him an email. Otherwise, really appreciate you again joining. And those of you listening in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we will talk to you all next week.